Hey Blake, what's going on?
Hey, buddy, how's it going? You hear me
Good. How
okay?
are you? You're looking big, dude, lately. I've been seeing you.
Trying to get back after it. I've been working with Derek again for the last couple months, and took a pretty big hiatus after dealing with some health complications after COVID and with being so busy with
Yeah.
graduate school and all that. I took a kind of a hiatus. Well, I was still lifting, but just not as intently with my diet
Right.
and stuff as before.
Yeah.
But
Which is
you know,
good. Like that's so important to realize you need to do that, and priorities need
yeah,
to take place, of course.
yeah, you're looking good. Looks like you moved and everything, huh? Moved down
Yeah,
to
yeah. I got
Texas,
out of
right?
Yep, Texas. I moved to Dallas. Funny enough, I moved here to like get out of the cold because I wanted to like be able to live outside and whatnot and walk when I wanted to walk.
Yeah, right.
But now it's like so I wanted my whole season. I wanted the whole year to be able to do things. But it's like 114 fucking degrees, so like you can't go outside anyways because it's just blistering hot. So
Yeah, I can't imagine it there. It's hot in Mississippi, very humid, but I couldn't imagine Texas. Yeah.
yeah, it's
But
just
I'm, I'm
and
I'm
it's
glad you did that though. I'm glad you
yeah,
got out of there and
yeah,
experienced something somewhere else.
exactly. I figure out like, dude, I'm young and like, why not try it? And there's a huge fitness culture out here. I mean, there's a gym on every corner, so it's super nice and a lot
Yeah,
of
there's a lot of good
growth.
coaches, a lot of good coaches too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good people around. All right, so a lot to talk about today, but I do want to ask you first kind of what got you interested into let's start here because a lot of my followers probably don't know who you are. So what is your thing? Like what is your specialty? What do you do for people? So on and so forth.
Yeah, so I'm a registered dietitian. I have my master's in nutrition from the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss. Hotty toddy with that. But I also have an undergraduate degree from Minnesota State University of Mankato, where I was a 5-year presidential scholar. Got really lucky to get that scholarship because otherwise I don't know if I would have actually went to college
Yeah.
without having such a big scholarship. The main reason I got into nutrition, I actually started out wanting to do pediatric nutrition because I wasn't like, I wouldn't say obese as a child, but pretty overweight, pretty big kid. Um, Really active in sports, and that's what really got me into doing more like weightlifting and such was football and wrestling and track, and 'cause I did a lot of shot putting and sprinting, stuff like that. So that's what really got me into it at first, and then obviously I wanted to help children really correct their obesity and weight loss issues,
Yeah.
because I felt such a struggle with that in general. But it's a lot of mental battle, when you're going through that as a kid, and luckily I didn't get picked on a lot. But other kids did, and it was hard to watch. But the functional side of things, I actually ran into my own health issues when I got into college, just because of the high amount of stress and working 2 jobs, and then trying to go to the gym 7 days a week and not knowing, under eating while trying to train 3 hours a day on top of doing construction, and just didn't work. And then threw my body for a loop, threw my hormones off, threw my digestion system way off. And then luckily I had come in contact with a friend who, at the time, I was doing construction management for college, and that's why I have a business minor. And then I ended up actually switching degrees to dietetics after speaking with a friend who was a year ahead of me in that program. And then at the same time, I was working with my coach and one of my main mentors, Derek Dolgner, out of Minnesota. I was working with him to correct a lot of my own functional issues. So then I kind of like saw what he was doing, and saw what I was learning in dietetics and kind of combined the two because I saw like, the functional side is highly missing from the Western community in
Yeah.
general. And that's why it's very separate, and you tend to hear each of them talk poorly about each other. But if you actually use both of them, it's very beneficial for a lot of people. And that's kind of how I got down the whole functional realm, and eventually got into, at first I was coaching just more functional clients. Then I started learning, I actually took a student loan out to pay Derek for mentoring on
Mhm.
top of my coaching because I saw how much of a big trend that was and how much the market for it was really increasing and how much the need is increasing. And I think we're seeing that more and more, especially after all the viral issues going around lately.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got into it. A long story, but yeah, I just
No,
kind
it's
of fell
awesome.
down this path.
Yeah, there's a book called Mastery. I don't know if you've heard of it, but he talks about like childhood vocations or like callings kind of leading us to where we go in the future and having to, some people stray from that path, but it's really cool when you can find something in a profession that follows that path. For you, you said you're a little out of shape when you're a kid, and then you kind of follow that up with like this massive amount of education and
Yeah.
kind of help other people. I think that's really cool. Um, what's maybe describe for people like what is a functional coach? Like if you had to say, briefly, like how would you describe a functional coach?
Yeah, so I mean, a functional coach can look like a lot of different realms. Normally, people specify in one thing. That's probably what's different for me is I have clients of all ages, all shapes and sizes, just all demographics in general, all the way from, children, like 10 years old,
Yeah.
trying to help them, fix mold issues, et cetera, all the way up to, 65, 70-year-olds trying to fix issues. But the biggest thing with functional coaching is using nutrition and certain, key nutrients, whether it's a supplement or coming from a functional food, and using those to correct the issues in general. I think one of the things that a lot of people are doing right now is treating symptoms, but the bigger issue is kind of actually finding the root cause of the issue, because people with like IBS, it really isn't an issue. It's not the main issue. It's just a symptom of a bigger issue that normally happened like later, like earlier in your life. And now you're starting to get symptoms of IBS or lower high stomach acid or those types of things trickle in. So it's really kind of trying to address the person as a whole and kind of work with them to solve their issues and build a proper timeline as to when these issues first started, so you can really pinpoint what triggered it in general. Whereas the Western medical field, they're really more focused on treating symptoms with medications. Sure, they do a lot of referrals to dietitians, but dietitians in the Western medicine field, their hands are very tied.
Yeah.
Scope of practice is a really big thing. Not that I don't follow scope of practice, but you can speak a little bit more openly about things that could help when you're not in that type of setting, essentially.
Right, for sure. And so when you're talking about kind of like hitting things from multiple like just taking IBS, for example, right? There's like a root cause there. Are you looking at things simply from nutrition? Are you diving into like lifestyle factors? Are you diving into,
all of it. So, really trying to figure out the person's lifestyle schedule, where their main stressors are coming from, how much stress they have. And really trying to target what organs are being affected most, whether it's from lab work or just a typical simple HAQ, health appraisal questionnaire. But really trying to target what is the main areas that are being affected and how can you best target those. And it can be from a lot of different realms. And I relate a lot of this to bodybuilding, because with bodybuilding, you have different modalities of things that you're adjusting, whether it's training or nutrition, bringing training up or down, bringing nutrition up or down, bringing supplements up or down, gear up or down,
right.
All those things, the same thing, just trying to manage lifestyle stress in the appropriate way, figuring out how much stress a person's body can handle from whether they're training or not. Like I said, I have clients all across the board. Some people I work with train really intensely, and that could have caused, been a big part of a lot of their health issues. Some people I coach don't work out at all. And they're just more of, cardio-based walking, Pilates, et cetera, yoga, but really trying to find the balance for the person and what works best for them. I think that's one of the biggest differences between what I do and other coaches is a lot of other coaches have like a mold that they try to fit clients into. And, that works for, probably 80% of people. But when you have people that have been dealing with health issues for a very long period of time, you have to kind of meet them where they're at, and because it's a lifestyle change at the end of the day, and that's what can be really hard about functional coaching is that's why, and I try to be really upfront with clients when they sign up with me, this is going to take 3 months, this is going to take 6 months, this could take a year, to really get all of your issues corrected in general and actually find the true root cause.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's like a beautiful component. I think the future of like the human health spectrum is, having a physician to help you, of course, but then having someone like you or I in the back corner trying to like provide insight into these other lifestyle factors. Because unfortunately, like you said, Western medicine is like, oh, this person's depressed. They don't even like ask questions like, what's your magnesium? And
right.
It's just like, here's this pill, come back 6 months later, let's talk about it. There's no blood work. There's no follow-up. There's no, maybe it's gut issues. Have you ever been bloated? Like, there's no questions that look further into it. And then combining, a good guy like you and a physician that's pretty, liberally applying different practical techniques. I think that's like a great place for the future of human health.
Mm-hmm. And I'm very, I'm very lucky. I have a couple different physicians that I work with hand in hand. One of my main mentors right now is a doctor out of Australia named Stuart Gillespie. He's a really, really great wealth of knowledge. He's been doing, functional health for 17 years. I also partner up with a nurse practitioner from Advanced Vitality Clinic. Her name's Megan. She's awesome. She actually, we work really well together because she actually had, Hashimoto's and even, I believe thyroid cancer even at one point. And my old boss, Vince, who was another one of my main mentors from Nutrition Dynamic, he actually helped her reverse a lot of that. So she understands how the Western side can actually pair up with the functional side to create a bigger positive change for people.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a huge thing, man. And it's an unfortunate loss, but a gain for them, right? Because they see it as like this quick check they can grab, and it's like a whole dynamic situation. But I love that you're like, I have the same mentality of you where it's like, go out, get education, find out what's really going on, and like just dig in deep and try to find out like what are the answers that we don't know about that, you know, might seem simple on the face of things, but when you really like dig into it, it's much more, you know,
Yeah.
it's so much more than that.
Yeah, you know, it's more than just, you know, getting steps in and, you know,
Yeah,
hitting your macro goals, all of those things. All of those things are important and all those things can work for people, but it's about creating the most adaptable plan for them and their lifestyle.
absolutely. So I've seen you kind of been posting some clients who are like, it appears they're looking on them to like develop their physiques and compete on some level within bodybuilding. And it's become clear to me after years of doing this now, working with competitors, that there's a lot of issues that certain people subscribe to just being a matter of fact. You're not, you know, you're eating too much, or you're eating too little, or, you know, it's a simple equation of, hey, like calories in, calories out. But I've just run across so many issues myself where I'm seeing people have these symptoms, and it's just like calories don't solve that. The amount of cardio can't solve that. It goes deeper. You know, I really think it would be beneficial when you talk about how can someone who's looking to develop their physique to the next level, one, tend to their health, but also care for these maybe intricate pieces that might not be represented online when people are talking about calories in, calories out.
Yeah, yeah, you know, there's a lot of debate with that, you know, calories in versus calories out right now. And if you're looking at things in layman terms, that's an accurate statement. You know, calories in does equal calories out, but they're just not factoring in. Basically, people are talking about the same thing, but they're talking about it in different fashions. They're not explaining, you know, how the thyroid communicates with the pituitary, you know, with the pituitary to communicate with sex hormones and all of those things in general, and how the liver is connected to the GI tract, and how all of these things, you know, if one of them is off, it's going to cause a disbalance in the whole, you know, basically kinetic chain of things, and then that can drastically shift your basal metabolic rate, or, you know, make you very poor, like you're looking at a cellular health level, because obviously the biggest component is our cellular health. If you have something dysfunctional with your cellular health, you're not going to be able to convert metabolites and energy appropriately, and then that's going to yield you to have just a lower overall basal metabolic rate in general. So at that point, you're not able to eat as many calories as your body actually should be able to eat.
Right.
And that's really one thing that we work on is, you know, especially with weight loss resistant or metabolic disease, is trying to feed them up and get their metabolism to a spot where it's actually burning more calories than it originally was by fixing dysfunction.
Absolutely. When you're trying to, and this is something I see personally very frequent in female competitors, is like they've just starved themselves to the ground, and now that's like, you know, they're 4 months out of a show and they're still eating 1,000 calories, and like they don't know what they're doing. When you are looking at a client who might be in that position and you're trying to kind of reverse that metabolic resistance, what are you in particular looking at? Like, what are you trying to do and hit as like action points along the way?
Yeah, I mean, that can be really person dependent based on, you know, how long the person's been doing the sport, or how long they've been doing that in general, how hard they've been pushing their body. You know, maybe a lot of times I run into people who had disordered eating when they were younger, and that can cause a lot of dysfunction. Just competing in general, you know, it can be really tough on the female body, especially on aromatization pathways.
Mm-hmm.
You actually see that a lot in PTSD cases. Severe PTSD, whether it's from whatever type of event, you see those. That's kind of how I feel like why a lot of people develop like PCOS type issues, is because they have something traumatic happen, and then basically their body starts shutting down. Especially with like, that's why those androgens start really rising, and they're not getting that aromatization pathway working appropriately. So then you're not getting enough estrogen, and that has a really big impact on your thyroid and all of those things. So the first thing that I would normally do after competition, you know, say they got done competing, I would try to start slowly working their calories up and get them towards at least a maintenance basal metabolic rate range, with an activity factor. And then I will try to do their lab work once their body's stabilized out some more, and correct any dysfunction that prep has caused. And then, you know, eventually, like, usually I do a Dutch test. I really like to use Dutch testing a lot, which is it's a little bit less invasive. You don't have to go into a private lab. Gives you a little bit more clear details. It's all urine based. You do it from home. It actually collects, you know, 4 points in time. That also tracks your cortisol throughout the day, which is a lot more accurate than just doing a once a day in the morning blood serum cortisol level. So looking at all of those factors, because obviously, you know, if you're adrenal response is really high from all the stress that you have to put on your body from prep, or it's really low. Trying to figure those things out is very important. You can do a lot of this stuff based on symptoms, but when it comes to hormones and adrenals, especially for a female, it can be a little bit tricky. And that's where really doing the proper testing comes in. But normally, like that's my process is trying to feed them up nice and slowly. Really, keep an eye on the thyroid, really keep an eye on cortisol and stress response overall, because obviously that can highly affect metabolism and blood sugar regulation. And, we all know having, a lower blood sugar in general will help a lot of the fat burning state, help you be in a fat burning state. But really trying to do that, and then do the follow up lab work, and check off all of our boxes to make sure we didn't like wreck anything in the process, essentially, because obviously everybody is drastically different, and how their body responds to stress is drastically different.
Right.
So that's kind of how I start things, and then we'll go through the test, try to correct anything that's off. If they have any GI issues, usually I can solve that just based off of symptoms, but sometimes a GI map is necessary in general. But the whole time that we're prepping, that's usually when you're using like the most supplements and things like that in general to try to keep your body as above water as possible.
Yeah.
Really. And that's where there's some really awesome coaches out there, like I can't remember his last name, but Callum, who's from Gas.
Okay.
He was just on like Fuad's podcast the other day and talking about how like you titrate cardio, and then you titrate training and gear and supplements and all these things. So it's basically just trying to get as much as you can out of the least amount of things and the least amount of stress on your body. A lot of people in prep that are prepping think they just need to push harder and harder and harder.
Right.
But sometimes you find out that it's like, okay, I took 2 days of cardio out of your plan and you're leaner.
Yeah, exactly. So, drop 4 pounds.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's that same thing when you're reversing people. Usually I'll keep people on cardio for a little while. Usually have them take a break from training at first, but then eventually we're titrating it all back in. And I try to keep a lot of cardiorespiratory activity in general, whether it's just walking outside or throwing in some conditioning days with like sled pushing and sled pulling, those kinds of things in general. But really trying to use like a lot of variety in what I do. And I think that's, a big benefit. And I've seen you do it a lot as well, like getting a lot of different mentors and learning from a lot of different people about, and kind of like building your own way and piecing things that you seem successful from what they have to offer and bringing that to everybody else.
Right. Exactly. Trying to become a jack of all trades in a sense is something I really aspire to do.
I don't know if that was kind of a long answer. I don't know if that answers.
No, I have a lot of questions to follow up with that, and this is going to go all sorts of places. So, one, you mentioned that you use kind of more supplements on the front end of a prep to kind of make sure that those things don't deviate too far down the drain. In a prophylactic sense, what are you finding most beneficial for some of your clients? And you don't have to divulge all your secrets, but what are some of the things that you think are highly influential to like a positive gut motility? I know that's one big issue I experience with a lot of clients is gut motility really slows down. But other things like that too, like what are you using as tools?
Yeah, so the biggest issues you have to I feel like the biggest issues people are going to run into when prepping has to do with like immune system, thyroid, adrenals, and liver. Gut is usually like involved in that as well. Like you're talking about with constipation, with having less calories than your body probably actually needs because that's kind of the point of getting leaner is you're kind of under normally that maintenance level. And that's why I feel like a lot of times people end up getting slow digestion. And that's, usually why people that I work with, like for actual competition, they'll probably notice in their off season, there's quite a bit less vegetable or just vegetation in general until we get into prep and kind of add a little bit more fiber in to help bulk those stools up and things like that. But some of the main supplements that I like to use when people are in prep, or even just in general for bowel regularity, and some of the cheapest and most effective things is magnesium citrate and vitamin C. I kind of talk about, I kind of say like magnesium citrate is like the softener, whereas the vitamin C is kind of like the pusher. So they work very synergistically to help with bowel regularity. There's also a couple other good products on the market, like using Cellcore makes a product called Bowel Mover, I believe it's called.
Yeah.
So there's a couple different products out there, whether, I might throw in some fulvic acid to help with absorption and binding of things. But really trying to keep, an easy digesting nutrition plan is really key, I'm sure, as you know, with the prep clients, so that way they're not getting any distension, and trying to figure out in their off season what foods work best for them, what foods they feel best on, digest best, get the best pumps and workouts on. Other things that other products that I really like to use when people are prepping is I'll normally throw in like a thyroid glandular product, whether that's medical grade or just like the Thyroid Boost Plus by New Ethics or TG100 by Allergy Research, because obviously as you're bringing calories down, that basal metabolic rate is going to decrease and your thermogenesis is going to decrease. So I want to keep that up as high as possible. And a lot of times that's where people can run into slowed motility, is when they are having
Yeah.
like lower thyroid symptoms
Right.
in general. That'll cause a lot of dysfunction, especially in women, when if they start seeing, more hair shedding or those types of things, it could easily be a thyroid issue. And that's why I often have clients of mine track their waking body temperature, because
Yeah.
body temperature is a very cheap and effective way to keep a kind of an eye on your thyroid health in general. Um, Other things, like I really highly rely on glutathione, whether it's injectable or liposomal form. Um, Basically, glutathione is just an amino acid, but it's super important for liver detoxification. Super key antioxidant that a lot of people are dysfunctional in. I guess just to say deficient in,
Yeah.
especially like people with, even just people, not even competitors, but people with health issues like diabetes and such. There's tons of studies showing how low their glutathione levels and such can be, and how massive an impact that can have on blood sugar and overall inflammation. Especially like I like doing it post workout before they go to bed. Like the days they work out, I'll have them take it before bed, and it helps, get a lot deeper sleep. They don't wake up as often, because that can be another big issue in prep. Using a sleep aid in prep, something like melatonin or GABA, or New Ethics makes a really good one called Relax Liposomal, which has a mixture of those and a couple other things in there. But those are the primary things I use. I use a lot of B vitamins when people are prepping, because of not getting as many from our food, but also depleting a lot of them. When, same thing with magnesium and B vitamins often get depleted in people that have higher stress levels or who are training quite a bit harder. And those B vitamins are super important, especially for thyroid and adrenal function overall. Let's see what else. I really like to use L-carnitine to help really mobilize, stored fat stores. L-carnitine works very synergistically with your body's own insulin, or whether you're using exogenous insulin, it works very synergistically to actually help mobilize those fat stores that your body's already holding for energy, especially when you're on like a lower fat diet in general. It's also really good for blood sugar and also really good for cholesterol levels.
Yeah.
Fish oils, I like to use fish oils a lot. I specifically try to use like SPM Active by Metagenics. It has not only your like DHA, EPA fish oils, but it also has what's called pro-resolving mediators. So those pro-resolving mediators are kind of attached, esterified to the backbone of the DHA and EPA, and it helps to actually get to the site of inflammation much more effectively for people. So I use that a lot in my functional cases too, whether it's autoimmune disease, but especially in arthritis and
Yeah.
such like that. It has a massive benefit in. Other things like immune system wise, I really like to use Immune Charge Plus by Quicksilver. It's a fat soluble vitamin compound, so it has all of your fat soluble vitamins A, E, D, and K, and then it also has a little bit of vitamin C, and also has some elderberry and it's all in a liposomal form product, so you're absorbing it all in your salivary glands.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So, dude, I have so many questions for you. It's crazy. I'm trying to like organize them all.
Yeah, I know,
So,
right? It's hard.
with the glutathione, one thing I find is like people are hesitant to do injectable, which is fine. I completely understand. I will have clients take NAC.
Yep.
What do you think? Is that an effective way? Do you find that that still kind of causes the same effects we're looking for? Or?
Yeah, there's a lot of debate on that. I think both of them are fine. Technically, basically glutathione is technically a step further in the chain
Right.
than NAC is. So like NAC, here's NAC, here's glutathione, here's your liver, kind of just, that's not actually how it is, but a simplistic way to put it. And like NAC is really great. There's actually a lot of debate about whether people should use NAC or glutathione. And I feel like it can be somewhat person dependent at the time. I just tend to use glutathione a lot more because I see more abrupt results with it. One thing I have had great success with, though, going back to bowel regularity, Pure Encapsulations makes a NAC and glycine powder. I found that massively helps with bowel regularity. That glycine really helps with regularity, and then obviously helping get things out of the liver and toxins out with the NAC is great.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then kind of reverting back to the testing, I have a huge, one of the biggest barriers I follow is trying to get people to commit to certain testing, right? Because blood work can be expensive. Dutch tests are definitely expensive for some individuals. GI map tests are wildly expensive, depending on your income, of course. But I sometimes find that treating the symptoms and just kind of doing like a general protocol for something like that is a more cost-effective way to treat what they're going through, as opposed to spending. Because like if you buy like like let's say you get everything you need for this protocol, like you're going to be getting basically you're going to be spending the same amount of money. as opposed to getting the test and then just knowing that you're going to need some sort of protocol anyways, but maybe that protocol will be a little bit more specific. Do you find
Yeah.
yourself kind of doing something like that, or?
Yeah, that's really the thing. It's like, how severe is their issue? You know, how severe
Okay.
are their issues? How long has this been occurring? A lot of times I will try, unless it's like a very severe case, or you know, I'll get people that have multiple autoimmune diseases, and you know, especially if they have like a pretty downregulated, you know, immunocompromised state, I'll be like, let's do testing. I don't want to throw, you know, I don't want to overly throw things at your body that are unnecessary, et cetera. But a lot of times, you know, especially when it comes down to GI health, it's usually pretty easy to like figure out what's going on and start a simple protocol, and then that's what I'll normally do. And if I'm not like, you know, if I give it, you know, 1 to 3 months and I'm not seeing the progress that we should be seeing, then I'll be like, okay, I really think we should take a step back and do a GI map and actually see what's going on more in depth, whether it's a specific bacterium that's high, whether it's, you know, parasite, or whether it's more, because that's where the GI map can really come in handy, because some symptoms can kind of double up. You know, you could think like, oh, maybe your pancreatic function and your, you know, and your elastase and such is low, and or maybe it's a bacteria, like maybe your good bacteria is really low, or maybe your bad bacteria is really high. So sometimes it can be hard to decipher which one of those it is, really.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. I love that.
But that is like, you know, yeah, those tests are very expensive. That's one thing that I'm working on, is getting all of those tests on our website, which they should be a lot more affordable than other places, since I have my registered dietitian and licensures. I'm able to sign up for accounts for all of those. I just actually signed up for Great Plains the other day to get organic acid tests and mycotoxin mold tests and such. So I'll have a lot of that up on a website, and I'm going to try to make it much more affordable than what other people are charging, because it can be at least a little bit more affordable for
Yeah.
people than what people are charging.
Yeah, and that's such a huge thing, because I always say test, don't gas, and I always think that, like, you know, we go for diagnostic tests for our vehicles all the time, and we get the mechanic's opinion. Hey, how does this look? You know, what might need work in 20,000 miles? And it's like, most Americans don't even check their fucking blood pressure. So it's like, you know, like doing these tests periodically throughout your lifespan kind of shows you where the trends are heading and if there's current issues. And
yeah, you know, that's kind of how I caught my own issues with COVID is, you know, ever since I've worked with Derek, he's hammered on me, you know, we need to check blood pressure a couple times a week. We need to check blood sugars a couple times a week. We need to check body temperature a couple times a week, and all of those things. And those are really easy things that, you know, you can spend $20, $30 and buy a blood pressure cuff on Amazon.
Yeah.
And, you know, $40, $50 for a blood sugar monitor. All very, very simplistic things to order and keep track of. And if you have those things and also have like an Oura Ring or a Whoop band, I mean, you can figure out a lot of stuff just based on that. I was actually able to find out that one of my clients who's type 1 diabetic had sleep apnea just based on his Oura Ring.
Yeah.
So, and he, you know, he went in and got a sleep study done, and, you know, sure enough, he had
horrible
sleep apnea. And as soon as I got him a sleep apnea machine, his whole body just started transforming.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, those metrics are really easy, basic to track, and they can tell you a lot of information.
Okay, solid.
Especially about, you know, how somebody's responding to a plan you have set up for them. Mm-hmm. You know, like say their blood sugar start going higher, or their blood pressure starts going too low or too high, et cetera. Can tell you a lot about, you know, what supplements you maybe should use, what kind of plan you should deploy, et cetera.
Okay. That's really good advice. So, and I tell everyone, like, in every single check-in, I have blood pressure and blood glucose. Like, I want to see where those things are trending. And while they're not definitive factors to give us like exact conclusions as to what's going wrong, it's so useful, and it gives you that edge. I mean, there's coaches who just ask for weight in their check-ins, and it's like, oh my God, dude, there's so much more to the story.
Yeah, definitely.
So, fuck, I have so many questions. So let's say you're having a competitor go through a fat loss phase, and, you know, their show's whatever, 18, 16 weeks out, 20 weeks out, whatever. And they hit like this plateau, and it's just like, you're throwing everything at them and nothing's happening. When you hit that situation, let's just say, again, because this is very common in female competitors, let's just say it's a female competitor, you know, she's doing her cardio, she's doing her diet. Are you finding there's obvious issues present when you come to that kind of plateau of weight loss, or are you looking at other things more in depth? What does that process look like?
Yeah, you know, that's why a lot of what I talk about is you need to, like, you know, prepping for a show is a privilege in all reality. And you need to really like prep your body to prep for a show. And that's why, you know, we go through certain health phases. I'll have people do a liver flush before they start a prep every single time. I'll have them do a liver flush when they're done with the prep, detoxify their liver, you know, restore a lot of balance within the body. maybe even use specific hormones while they're prepping or after they're prepping, whether it's like, maybe using some pregnenolone, maybe using some
Yeah.
chasteberry after or during their prep to keep things in line, and keep those hormones balanced. But yeah, when they come into a snag like that, I'll usually try to like, shift gears a little bit and get their body to see if it'll respond to something else, whether it's like, bring calories up for a week and pull training down or vice versa. Or usually I'll try to push them a little bit harder
Yeah.
first to make sure that's not the, underlying cause, because everybody has a different threshold, especially like, depending on how many years they've been doing it and such, just going back to that again, like if they've been prepping for a long time and put a lot of stress on their body, or how much muscle mass they carry, and all of those things can make a big drastic difference in that. But in general, if I ran into that, yeah, I would either try to push harder, or I would like pull things majorly back, either one of those directions based on their body's response. If you're seeing blood sugar rise a bunch, and you're seeing HRV scores plummet and resting heart rate climb up, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna take a break from cardio this week. We're just gonna hit our workouts. We're gonna increase your nutrition for a bit. Your body's getting stressed out. But if we're hitting really big snags, and we're like 6 weeks out and their body's completely stalled out and we've tried a couple different things, I'll just be like, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Let's pull out of this. Let's fix your body. And there's going to be tons of other shows to do. Why would you want to, why you're putting so much time and energy into it? Why would you want to not have your best look and spend all this money and be on stage in front of everybody?
Right.
So I'll try different modalities to get their body to respond, or add certain supplements or functional foods to try to recover whatever's going on. But if we've tried that for a few weeks and things just aren't moving, or they're trending backwards, then I'll be like, let's just pull out of this and get some lab work and figure out exactly what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's a hard conversation to have for sure, when you tell someone who's been like working for 10 weeks already that, hey, this isn't the time for you, and it takes a good coach to say that too. It's the thing. But
yeah, and that's why I really try to prepare people. Like, before I do a prep with anybody, I'm like, you have to have an Oura ring. Like, that's one of my mandatory things. I'm like, we have to have an Oura ring, because you can't, if you waste a week, that's a lot of time in a prep.
yeah.
Like where maybe that you could have been pushing them harder that whole week, or maybe you should have been pulling them back that whole week, and now you've just dug yourself into a further hole. So that's why I'm really adamant. Like, you need an Oura ring or Whoop band, you need a blood sugar monitor, you need all these things so we can actually optimize all this the best. And a lot of times, like, I don't think I've ever prepped anyone without having them do lab work first.
That's
Because I don't want them to waste their time or money on it. And I try to be upfront with everybody. I'm like, this sport is not cheap. This is going to take a lot of your money. I tell them, posing and tanning and all that stuff. So that way they're not, running into any unexpected stressors, because that's one of the biggest things, I'm sure, as is controlling stress levels.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're having clients kind of enter that fat loss phase, and you're noticing these plateauing moments, I think my question just slipped my mind. Yes. So are you, and this goes for male or female competitors, but the compounds they're using, performance enhancing drugs, are these causing any of the issues that you're looking at as a real problem to their current symptoms, or is that usually innocuous to what's going on?
Yeah, usually it's always pretty synergistically. Everybody wants to point a finger at one thing. Usually,
Yeah.
That's really common in just like clinical field and everything. They want to point at, it's that thing. But a lot of times it can be multiple things that are kind of compounding on top of each other. And that's why it's really important. Especially when you're talking about using anabolics and people competing enhanced and everything, is looking at that person's lab work and seeing what their natural preferences are. Like, what does their body actually preference? How much of this certain hormones do they already have? What are they missing? What can help them optimize things? Are they a really low DHT person? Are they a really high DHT person? Are they low in progesterone? All of those things in general. Are they aromatizing properly? Because obviously, if they're having issues with aromatization and all of those things, you can kind of correct that before you get into a prep. But I think the key component to it is just figuring out what the person's body responds best to, and taking the time to start at low doses and working it up to find what's the highest ceiling for their body before they get symptoms. A lot of people will be like, oh, well, this person was taking this much, so I'm going to take that much. Well, you could be a hyper responder. I've seen people that, I've had friends that have literally, like, I was amazed by how much they've transformed in a year, and then their body just goes to complete shit.
Yeah.
Because they don't need that much stuff.
Right.
So I think that's the biggest thing, is finding out what responds best for that person's body and what their body actually needs.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a huge thing. And people would debate like, oh, 250 milligrams as a starting dose is not worth it. I'm like, dude, like, if you've seen some of my clients who It's fucking insane. Like you
Hmm.
don't need as much as you need. And James Hollingstad, I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yeah.
He's taking, people called him out on this so bad. He's taking
10 milligrams.
yeah,
Yeah.
a day, and he looks amazing, and it's just like there's not a plug and play. Like you have to test these things and kind
Yeah.
of
I hate when people say that stuff where they're like, oh, you have to use Tren if you're prepping. Like,
yeah,
I didn't use Tren last time I prepped.
yeah,
It makes me mentally go almost insane.
yeah,
I'm that's like, I always tell people like these things don't give you like roid rage or anything like that. It's the fact that some of these compounds can enhance some of your bad traits.
hmm
I tend to be pretty short patience that time. My mind thinks really fast. So when people
yeah.
are being slow, then
Mine too.
I'm like,
Yeah,
what's going on? So then like when I was on trend, that like amplified it to a place where I couldn't even control it, So
mhm.
there's things where you have to like set boundaries with and figure out like what doesn't work for your body.
Yeah,
It's all about controlling, we were just talking about those stress variables, that's going to throw your mental state through a loop and then you might not even be able to
absolutely.
finish your prep, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely.
But no, I think that's where, Callum just did that podcast with Fuad and he put a lot of great things in there, talking about how I think he explained it perfectly where he was like, I'll start somebody at 250 and then we'll go up to, whatever titrated
Mhm.
up, to a certain spot where they're not getting any estrogen issues.
Yeah,
And kind of find that spot where they start getting estrogen issues, then, maybe back it down a little bit, then add like a DHT compound, or if you're in the off season, you might add a 19 norester compound. Prep, you might throw in some Clen at certain spots.
mhm.
You might throw in like thyroid medication at certain spots. You might use insulin at certain spots during your off season to actually take, insulin gets a really bad rep, but it's just because
They're
people
abusing.
aren't using, yeah, they're not using it the
Yeah,
proper way, and they're not utilizing it how it should be used. It can actually take a lot of stress off the body if it's used properly.
yeah,
In certain times, it's not something you should be taking all the time year round or anything, but if you're using it in certain growth phases where you're,
oh yeah,
say you're eating 800 to 1,000 grams of carbohydrates, it can actually be a big benefit and take stress off your
yeah,
pancreas
yeah.
and such. So,
Yeah, it's interesting. If you use insulin properly, you can become more insulin sensitive. I think people kind of mess it up, and then they get insulin resistant. And I remember, like, dude, like 3 years ago, we were talking about Lantus because it's kind of like a newer thing in the scene as of that time period. There's only a couple people talking about it, and you're like, yeah, dude, like, this is gonna save your beta cells in your kidney or your pancreas. And
yeah.
I was like, yeah, it's so interesting. I researched it. I'm applying it. It's like the shit. Like, it really helps modulate. One, I oddly noticed like bloat does not happen to the extent it does without it. And
Mm-hmm.
two, my blood sugars just at a resting rate are so much better. My postgrandial are so much better. And I've seen the research when you have a person who reaches 130 decograms per milliliter of blood sugar, and there's a lot of things like optic nerves are dying.
Yeah.
Blood-brain barrier, getting issues there. So just having that as it's sad that people think of insulin as this thing, and polypharmacy is really the way forward. Like, it's more complicated, but it's complicated for a good reason because you're using the minimum effective dose of many things to spread out the systemic burden as opposed to just like hammering down like
Correct.
on a trend and then hoping for the best, because that's
Yeah, yeah. Polypharmacy is awesome, and that's why it's definitely very difficult. I've been studying this stuff for like 10 years, of my life, just it's like fully indulged into it and dove like head in first. And this is like essentially my main hobby, also
yeah,
my job, but essentially my main hobby. And that's why you don't really see many endocrinologists at a hospital. Most hospitals will staff. Bigger hospitals, they might have 3 endocrinologists.
yeah,
Small hospitals, they might have 0 endocrinologists.
right,
And that's kind of sad because endocrinology is a big piece for a lot of people's, especially metabolic dysfunction.
yeah,
And actually understanding, the proper, blood sugar response and, doing, 10-minute, stand after 10-minute walks
yeah.
before or after your meals and all these things like there's simple things out there that people could employ that could easily shift things for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's another, sad dysfunction of our medical system is how compartmentalized it is. Because one guy, yes, he's like the expert on one subject, but like the body is not just one subject.
Yeah, yeah, that's the hard part, and that's why I never claim to science is always changing.
yeah,
That's why that's why you and I are both really big in research. You have to stay on top of the research. That's why I had 5 job offers coming out of graduate school, even during COVID and everything,
that's
and that's just because if you know how to talk to people and you can interview them and use motivational interviewing as a really good tool, and as soon as you come out of college, you're the person that knows all the newest things.
yeah,
And a lot of what I see a lot is like you have these doctors that have been doing stuff for 20 years and they have all this experience, but all of their I guess you could say protocols or knowledge is outdated. Science, sure, there's facts in science, but facts can even change too.
Mhm.
That's the stuff is always changing. The medication you're on right now could be completely safe right now. 10 years down the road, it's getting recalled.
Yeah.
Um, so it's you have to keep learning and evolving and studying this stuff. Otherwise, you'll become obsolete,
Yeah.
especially in today's world where everything is so fast paced.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. Um, Going back to the Oura Ring, Whoop Band, whatever. I love the Oura Ring. I recommend all my clients get it. What are you most frequently looking at as measurements on there as biomarkers to track?
On the Aura itself,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I highly focus mainly on the readiness page. If people have really bad HRV scores, I'll really try to focus on all of them to figure out. The biggest thing is figuring out what is the missing link. Is your sleep the missing link? Is your respiratory rate the missing link? Oxygen levels? Is it your resting heart rate is too high? So you're trying to look at all of those the variables that it gives you and figure out why that HRV is so low. And a lot of times, some of the people that I see have the lowest HRVs are people dealing with either viral infections or toxin overload. Those are some of the where people are like stuck at a 20 HRV and it's not moving at all. Like you could bring calories up, calories down, and it doesn't move barely at all. And a lot of times those people have some bigger underlying issue. But I really rely mainly on the readiness page where it has the heart rate, resting heart rate, HRV, body temperature change, and respiratory rate. Those are the ones that I majorly focus on the Oura Ring because you can learn a lot from those 4 data points.
Yeah. When it comes to the respiratory rate, that's one I'm actually unfamiliar with, I completely admit. What is that measuring and what's the significance of that?
I believe it's measuring your breaths per minute.
Okay.
So your respiration per minute, essentially. And that's how I was able to find out that my client, the type 1 diabetic client, had sleep apnea, was because, most people's respiration rate on the Oura Ring that I've seen, because I've seen a lot of different people's stats, and I've actually, they have some of this information on their website too, about like what normal ranges are and stuff. But most people should be in the like 14 to 16 range. Some of your ex-athletes or current athletes, people who like do a lot of running training, dynamic training, some of those people will be like 18 to 22 for like high endurance trainers, but his was like down in like 10 or 11.
Oh wow.
And so I'm like, yours is way too low and there's something going on here.
Yeah.
And it seems to be pretty accurate, and that's why I look at a lot. And the body temperature changes are really, really important when you're in prep, or also, for females when you're talking about trying to regulate hormones, or even thyroid cases. That body temperature change, I use a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the one I do up to. I think that's one thing I tracked on my last prep was the body temperature. And kind of like you said, like I'm one of those guys that can just run myself to the ground without a problem. And it was like 8 weeks out, I decided to do a show, and I was like, all right, well, this means I'm only eating fish, egg whites, and some like Trader Joe's dragon sauce. That was like my meals for 8 weeks. I got like
no fat.
Yeah,
I got shredded. Yeah.
I lost all my fucking muscle too. And I would watch my body temperature like go, like the graph looked horrendous. It was just going down, going down, going down. And since then, I've gone through fat loss phases where I've like actually kind of kept my mind stable and not just like hammer down.
Yep.
And it kind of remains more stable. So I find that as a really useful tool for myself too.
That's something that going back to James Hollingshead, that's kind of something that he was talking about was, he's used to the last couple shows he's done, he hasn't brought his best package. And because he pushes himself so hard that he ends up like almost dieting muscle off and creating more, he doesn't create more inflammation. He stays pretty dry, but some people like myself, like I would just start getting inflamed.
Yeah.
Like that's why last time I haven't prepped, for 2 or 3 years, because last time I got pretty bad pneumonia like 2 weeks out.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know until 2 months after my show that I had pneumonia. And yeah, it's pretty crazy. And that's when my body like started really going downhill, was after that happening. So everybody's genetics and overall like internal body components are can be drastically different.
Yeah, wildly
different.
Yeah. When speaking on that, just because, again, I have a bazillion questions, and let me know if you got to go too, because I could talk all day.
Oh, you're good.
What do you think, do you use refeeds in a fat loss phase?
Definitely use refeeds.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, I definitely use refeeds. It depends on the person and like where they're at. in their current progress and like how far out they are, I honestly usually try to give people like, sushi or burgers and stuff like that, depending if they're in a really good spot, like if their prep's on track.
Yeah.
I'll actually try to use some of those strategically to figure out like what does your body digest well in case we get in a bind, and we really need to, bring in like energy dense foods.
Yeah.
I'll throw some of those in like earlier in prep to be like, okay, I know a burger and fry digest well from you, and I try to have them stick to like the same place, like, okay, go to Five Guys or go here, so that way when we go somewhere you can get the same exact thing. Or I use like sushi a lot if they have. That depends on like how good their digestion is, because most people, if they have really like low stomach acid or poor digestion, they won't digest raw fish very well, just because of the denaturing aspect of cooking, the cooking process and stuff. But I'll do that, or I'll just do like clean refeeds too. It just really depends on the person and how and their metabolic rate and such. How about you?
And I do a lot of the same things too. I think one, the not so clean refeeds are useful for, it's kind of like you're two birds with one stone. And I try to recommend, like, if I'm going to give someone a refeed that's like sushi, for example, or a burger, I'm like, hey, the only thing that I'm going to make mandatory with this meal is you bring a friend with you, or you bring your family with you, you have another. And it's a really good tool to like literally cause a dopaminergic reaction to the environment, associating that with your friends and overall systemically lowering stress for the next several days. I find it's like a super useful tool.
Oh yeah, no, like they were just talking about that. One of the other podcasts was talking about that. Like you have to have normalcy on certain days, and that's like why I really do that, is be like, go out, get some sushi with your girlfriend. I usually put like limitations. I'll be like, okay, let's get a burger and 2 fries, or let's get four or six rolls of sushi or something. I try to put limitations on it so it's not like a bench fest. But I think it's really important to have that diet break. And you might get a little bit of water. A lot of people will soak it up if they're on pace in their prep. Sometimes you might get a little of like fluid retention, but that you can usually get that to drop off. Just say like putting a low day right behind it, or have a training day on the next day, or et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll let you go. I have a call coming up here with a client in a couple of minutes. Where can people find you, first of all? What are you going to help them with when they find you? And just plug away from there. Yeah,
so you guys can I'm mainly on Instagram. I also have Facebook and Snapchat and such, but I mainly use Instagram. I'm honestly not even the best at posting on Instagram. I'm not the biggest social media person. My email is bodiesbyBlakeCoaching if you're interested in working with me for one-on-one coaching. Otherwise, I have, if you just want to do like a consultation about your own case and had questions about your own like lab work or et cetera, I also do just one-on-one consultations, which can be booked through my link tree in my Instagram profile. There's a nutrition coaching tab you can click on, and it'll bring you to my Calendly link. You can find a day and time that works great for you. So there's my email, there's my Instagram. Those are the main things that I use really in general. And what I really help people with is kind of deciphering what are the pressure points that are affecting whatever they're trying to achieve, whether it's competing or they've been dealing with autoimmune disease or GI issues for a long period of time, or, eczema or acne or skin issues, et cetera, thyroid issues. I try to actually, get down to the root cause and help them actually at least improve symptoms. But if we can get down to the root cause and solve that, then that's what we try to do.
Awesome. Love it, man.
All awesome, right, well, man. It was great chatting with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for having me on.
If you ever need anything, hit me up, okay?
Awesome. Will do, buddy. Talk to you later. We'll have to do this again.
Yeah.
Later.